Welcome to our podcast.
I completely forgot to record.
No, we're getting off to a great start here.
It's a pretty bad joke, yes.
He's one of those people when he starts talking, you just listen.
And that's when I threw the book across the room. I've never thrown a book in anger, but I was so pissed at what I just read. I mean, I think I stopped, I went back and I reread it to make sure that I was digesting this correctly.
Most of this podcast is going to suck, by the way.
Hola, bienvenidos a la Murga podcast in inglés. And I am your host, La AJ Murga. And today I've got my buddy coming back for the second time. Welcome back, Chris Gregory. How you doing, Chris?
What's up, buddy? How are you?
Woo, doing good. I'm very excited for today's conversation because you and I are both big fans of Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, that kind of stuff. Night of the Seven Kingdom. If we have time to talk about that one, we will. But we've got a lot to cover, obviously, because there's a lot of material here with all of these books and shows and whatnot. But because there is so much to talk about, let's just jump right into it. How big of a fan would you consider yourself for Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon? And when did you kind of get started into this stuff?
A buddy gave me the book when they were in production for the first season, and I devoured it. Absolutely devoured it. This book series has the honor of being the only book series I've ever thrown across the room in anger and not touched for several days after reading certain parts of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, you know, the Red Wedding, when you have no idea it's coming. I mean, and the book version in particular is particularly gruesome.
Yes, definitely.
And pretty big fan. Yeah, I've read each of the books multiple times.
Nice.
10 years ago, I would have said I was a huge fan. 15 years since the last book came out, though. What did the series end in 2018? Is that right? 8 years ago?
That sounds right. 18, I think you're right. That's right, because I remember where we were when I was watching the final season. So yes, 18 sounds right to me. Man.
Yeah.
It's been so long.
It has, and unfortunately, the rewatchability was just murdered by the last two seasons. Like, it's not even something that I've gone back and rewatched a whole lot of, just because, I've just been holding out for the book.
Yes.
That's the real story right there, anyways. But 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, pretty big fan, just not as I don't remember as much as I did probably 10 years ago, though. To be honest.
Totally fair. And yeah. I've read through the books twice. I love them as well. I have not read Fire and Blood, which is what House of the Dragon is based on. Have you read Fire and Blood?
No, I have read a few years ago when it first came out. I did read the House of the War. Can't remember what
the War of the Roses or whatever it's called. Yeah. Or it's based. It's based on that, at least, anyway. Yeah, right. I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Is it a dance of the dragons, something like that? I don't know.
Right.
I did read that a couple years ago, but I'm not like super up to date on it. Like, there were things like Blood and Cheese. I had to go back and reread. I missed a lot of that.
Yeah.
That was a hell of a part of the story.
Yeah, you're right. Dance of the Dragons. I found it in my notes there, finally. So, yes, but it was in real life, it was based on the War of the Roses, which I'll interject real quick. There's another book I think that you would find fascinating. I don't know if a lot of people know about this. It's called Iron, Fire, and Ice, and it's the real history that inspired Game of Thrones. Have you ever heard of this book?
Oh, no, I have not.
It's fascinating. It's by a nonfiction author and British journalist named Ed West. It came out in 2019. And it's a fascinating read, and that's where I got the War of the Roses from. But yeah, it's a fascinating read. I loved it. So I just wanted to drop that real quick for anybody who is a big fan of this series and this stuff. And I kind of stumbled across it a few years back, and I read it, and I was like, wow, this is fascinating. There's a ton of interesting stuff there that shows you. And I love it because he goes along and shows you or gives you clips from the book, excerpts, and then tells you where it came from in real history. So I just found that fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's tons of cool stuff like that, like the wall being based on the Roman wall that they built in Scotland. I don't remember. Like super cool stuff that's connected.
Absolutely. And as a historical fiction guy, I love that kind of stuff. I go extra crazy. Like, the fantasy stuff is really cool. The dragons are really cool. But when you can find a way to take real history and put it into that world, oh man, it gives me an extra boost. I'm curious about parts that you said that you threw the book across the room, and what 10 years later, what does stand out to you more than anything else? Moments like that or whatever.
I mean, it was just such a gripping read, and it was, I mean, I'll never forget reading Ned's death for the first time. Like it was genuinely shocking. I mean, it didn't, what do you mean? This is the main, this is everything right here. It was kind of wild, but those books are so deep. There's so deep. There's so much to them. There's so much when you reread it. There's so much that you missed the first time through, and
They're
then
dense.
when
They're
you do
very
it
dense.
the third time and the fourth time, same thing. I mean, like I said, I've read each one multiple times, and then I go online and I read through like the subreddit, and like I'm wondering, did I even read the same book? How did I miss all these things? There are so many cool fan theories and stuff that the show didn't either touch on or people, like, it just completely went over my head. But the Red Wedding was so shocking. I mean, even knowing that everybody, but it just felt like, at some point there had to be some big payoff, something, justice is coming. No.
I know. Yeah, I know. That's to me. That's one of the things that stands out most as well from really both of these series is so many of the main characters. It seems like they do things that lead to their own demise, and their demise is oftentimes brutal, oftentimes shocking. And then when you trace the breadcrumbs back, you can see, oh, okay, they did stuff that led to this. I think of Jon Snow. He's just got so much pride in ethics, and those ultimately get him, betrayed by his men, even though he's trying to save them, or I should say, serve them. What stands out to you in this series, House of the Dragon, that would maybe compare to some of the great parts of Game of Thrones? Because for me, this series definitely lacks compared to Game of Thrones, but it is a spin-off and it doesn't have like an actual book of material to go from. But there are some great moments, and I'm curious if you agree with me on some of the ones.
No, absolutely. The first one that comes to mind is in season 1 when her dad, remind me her dad's name.
You talking about oh boy,
King Viserys, isn't it?
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So season 1, the episode where he is deathly ill and hasn't left his bed in weeks, and then he shows up in the throne room. I mean, I thought that was an amazing performance by him. That to me, that was the highlight of season 1. That episode was unbelievable. And then you end with Daemon cutting somebody's head off at the very end of it.
Yeah.
The building in season 1 was really good. I really enjoyed watching the two girls, and then as they progress and get older, the two women and the way they interact with each other. I thought that was extremely well done in season 1. And then season 1 was really just a builder. Season 2 is when things started really coming to a head there. Some of the things that I don't like, that I think there's similar things they did in the show. Alicent showing up at Dragonstone seemingly overnight, like that was kind of ridiculous. Rhaenyra, I believe she went to King's Landing and snuck into King's Landing too, right? Like, I mean, come on.
The travel in this series, really the whole series, can be pretty convenient. I remember thinking, well, when the hell is Khaleesi going to finally get there to King's Landing, right? We've been watching her for 4 or 5 seasons, and she still can't get there. Maybe more by the end of it. But I did find something fascinating. I'm sure you thought about this, but most of Westeros is spread out north and south. There's not a lot of east to west. So unlike America, when you're traveling great distances and it's a thin land like that, you're probably going to come across all the terrain, all the different weather, all the different civilizations. So it makes sense that there would be a lot of roadblocks and road barriers, which would, slow travel down, especially in a world like this. But then, like you said, when it's convenient, they all of a sudden can get there very quickly, and they're not usually riding on dragons' backs. So what the hell's up with that? I agree. I like how you pulled out season 1 quite a bit for House of the Dragon, because I do kind of go back to that one as one of my more favorite seasons so far. I don't think I thought the very opening of the series with the king Hightower making a choice to get the baby out of his wife's stomach like that. I thought that was a very captivating way to open the series, and very kind of set the tone for the graphic nature of what Martin likes to do. Brutal, just brutal, and then that tone continues, and that's one of the things that I like about this series, that it does still have that same tone, that same graphic nature. And and there's lots of deaths throughout the series that probably echo that as well. What do you think about that, or does anything stand out in terms of the tone being similar?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with that. The tone is very similar. One thing I was bemoaning just watching a minute ago, or not a minute ago, earlier this morning, I rewatched the final episode just to kind of buff up on some of it, and Damon finds himself in quite a fight for his life there,
Sure did.
and then out of nowhere, the dragon shows up and is breathing fire. And now suddenly there's a barrier between him and his imminent demise. I was a little frustrated with that. Like,
Yes.
make it count. Like, let's believe that he might die right here, because he was losing that fight.
Definitely.
It's been good. I mean, it's a different story, while there is war, it's interesting to watch them deal with. I mean, you get dragons and nuclear weapons kind of similar, like it's the atomic option. You go there and, so it makes sense that you see a little bit less of, people are more reluctant to use that, to take that option, and they don't want it to be used against them either. So it adds an interesting dynamic to everything that's going on. I don't know. It's a different story, it's definitely, it's much different. But it's enjoyable, like I definitely find myself enjoying it. I try my best not to nitpick it too much.
Yes.
But they've done a good job. It's been entertaining. It's definitely been entertaining.
I agree. When I nitpick things like this, I typically try not to do it from like a fandom standpoint, like I try to keep my own personal bias of what I would like to see out of the picture. And I kind of like nitpick at some of the technical things, the technical or like the conveniences, like all of a sudden Damon's getting his ass kicked, but here comes this dragon and kind of saves him through happenstance. I don't personally care for that sort of thing either, because you're right. It lowers the stakes. It makes it feel like he has plot armor. Yeah, and but boy, I will say, Hightower sure didn't have plot armor, didn't he? He got that guy got maybe the worst death I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, the North gave him a proper one, huh?
They sure did, but that kind of also speaks to the battle as a whole. I actually really liked that battle. For me, it was one of my favorite battles of all the series. There was a lot going on, but then ultimately there was a handful of moments where, like you said, it was convenient, and the dragon showed up and kind of just like ended everything, because how do you compete with that? But there was these good moments, like what happened with Hightower, and I wanted to point out one other moment with the children. When they put the children in front of the gate to think like, oh, you're not going to bust through this because there's kids there. Right before that happened, the northern leader guy with the axe, I forget his name, he just chopped down another kid, like a teenage kid, basically in the face. And so because that had just happened, it made me believe that these kids might actually die too. And I thought that was a subtle but a very like good setup to make me believe that, okay, kids aren't, the kids are vulnerable here. And so little moments like that, I do feel like stick with me sometimes, because it's got, you can tell like there's another layer of thought under there. It's not just, oh, what do we need to have happen? Let's throw something interesting into the mix that makes it thought provoking as well. And when this series is doing things like that, I think it's fantastic. I have another scene that I want to point out, but I want to hear what you think about that first.
No, I agree. The battle was great. It was really fun to watch Damon get on his dragon and get through the battlements, tell the kids, get out of the way, get out of the way, but that's a very realistic thing, like that is how you would use a dragon in that situation. I mean,
Totally.
if you're not going to just burn the whole town down, at least make it accessible with the dragon. So that was really well done. I even liked at the last minute Darren coming out and trying to make a backdoor peace treaty at the last minute there. It was very enjoyable, and like you said, the guy, the northern, I mean, he must be a Stark, right? He must be.
This is one of my biggest criticisms of this series is a lot of the more distant characters. They're not focused on enough. I can't remember any of their damn names. Like you said, North, and I was like, oh yeah, he is probably from the North, right? I didn't even really, so I can't help you there. I apologize.
All right, yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, no, it was definitely the northern that they sent the men from the north they sent through first. And like you were saying, that scene with that teenager, I mean, he literally hit him in the calf with a stick, and he turned around and got an axe to the face for it. That was gruesome.
Absolutely.
And watching Osmond come to his ultimate end there, that was a good scene too. It was interesting what they did. Part of what is always going on in my mind when something like, oh, Ulf passed out in the latrine, oh, we can't find him, is the first thing that comes to my mind is like, oh, they didn't have the budget for the dragons, something like that.
Right.
But no, it was very enjoyable, and then Ulf ultimately at the end, I don't what Osmond was thinking, beating the shit out of him, treating him like a dog, and then expecting he's going to go and do exactly what he wanted him to do. You kind of saw that one coming.
For sure.
Yeah, it was good. It was enjoyable.
And I did like how ultimately it was just chaotic, the dragons, like you said, that choice led to, Ulf just blazing hell all through the town. So, and I liked that. I that does seem like the chaos of war that it really would be. And so, good details and good moments like that really stand out for me in this series. And we only have 3 seasons to compare to 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, which we will get back to here soon. But I wanted to point out one other part that I think from House of the Dragon that holds up, for me at least, to the whole series of Game of Thrones. And that would be, I can't remember when in season 2 it is, but it's when they get revenge on the child death from season 1, and they ultimately cut down the kid in his crib, and the maid babysitter girl. I can't remember. I think she was a family member, but she takes another child and gets it out of there, and it was she confused the murderers on which kid was which, and that whole scene was so intense and riveting. In my opinion, it's one of those like haunting moments. And again, a gruesome part. Martin he's got some problems, but in a good way, I guess. But yeah, that part really stood out to me. I don't know if you remember that very well, or if you remember any other, like, what are some of the parts that stand out most to you about this series?
The parts that Damon is captivating. The actor does a fantastic job of making him all the different facets. There are times where I'm fascinated by him and I want to see him more on my screen. There's times I'm absolutely disgusted by him.
Totally.
And the choices that, I mean, good Lord, the man's insane. I mean, killing his first wife in season 1 really set the tone for what's going on in his head. And then some of the more dark, disturbing things, watching him seduce Rhaenyra, and essentially grooming her at that age, and then seeing it all come together, which I realize, of course, the Targaryens are known for being incestuous and marrying like that, but I mean, she was really young, and he absolutely groomed her for, what we currently see, in season 2. That was a great semi cliffhanger. They were working the last half of the season where you didn't know which way he was going to go. Was he going to strike out on his own, or was he going to have his wife's back? And then when he came back and declared for her after taking Harrenhal, I believe, was a pretty great moment. It was kind of like one of those King in the North moments that we got from Game of Thrones. So that was great. That was a good reminiscent piece from Game of Thrones. And some of the dragon stuff has been absolutely amazing. I mean, when in season 1 when Melise breaks free from underneath when everybody's up front or everybody's up top and they're crowning Aegon. That was an amazing moment, which of course though begs the question of everybody's right there. You could have burned them all, right then and there. But
good point. Yeah.
But the visual was fantastic. It was great. And Melise was one of those where I was really cheering for her. And I mean, she was an amazing character. She gracefully accepted the council's decision to not allow her to rule, and she stayed within her family and had everybody's backs. She was a great figure. And then, her death was one of those gut punches, like kind of getting tired of taking gut punches at this point,
Yeah,
like, I mean,
absolutely.
I love the tone. I love the gruesomeness, but it's like the gut punches never end.
That's Martin. He's relentless with these gut punches, like it's even more brutal, like you said in the books. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up Damon and some of this stuff, because that makes me think of a point that I wanted to do to start to compare House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones. Damon is a great character. I think he holds up with pretty much any character in Game of Thrones, the best of them. But I will say, and again, there's not the wealth of material to pull from for House of the Dragon. They're working on one book, which is essentially written as a fake historical chronicle rather than a traditional narrative. And but my point being, Game of Thrones has so many rich characters, throughout the whole series, and there's no in House of the Dragon. Yes, Daemon is great, and I will say some powerful acting in the show, but there's nobody that's like Tyrion. There is no, even Cersei. There is no Cersei. There's so many amazing characters in Game of Thrones that just really pull me in, and I find just unbelievably fascinating on multiple levels. And then you add in the amazing acting of Peter Dinklage and Lena Headey, and yeah, just that for me is one of the downfalls of House of the Dragon. The show is, it just doesn't, it feels less dense. Like you were saying, the books are so dense in Game of Thrones. You can feel it, at least, and I can sometimes. You can feel it and you can see it in the depth of the characters and the complexity of the characters. Am I reading too much into that there, or what do you think?
No, I totally agree. I mean, but like you said, though, we're talking about like a chapter,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, a chapter with an unreliable narrator,
Mm.
you know, which I think they lean heavily into, especially the writers lean heavily into that, and they have to, they have to flesh out. There's so many details that need to be fleshed out. It's really just a rough draft of a story. The written material is, versus Game of Thrones. I mean, good Lord, you've got unbelievable depth, I mean, histories and, all sorts of reasons why people act the way they do and are the way they are, going back to, feuds that happened hundreds of years ago. And it's definitely it's thinner.
Yes.
Let's put it that way. House of the Dragon is definitely thinner, but heavy on dragons.
Yes, no, and I agree. I'm glad you brought that up as well, because that is one of the things I think that it has over Game of Thrones, at least the show, and is
Yeah.
Game of Thrones takes so long to get to the first dragon fight, and it makes sense. These dragons are the only dragons in the world. We got to wait for them to grow up and all that. And I like how they did that. But boy, we get dragons right away pretty much in this series. And the dragon fights have been huge standouts. I remember when Aegon got burned. That was an incredible dragon fight. And I liked I liked episode 1 of this season on the with all the boats and the ships and all that. So that was an incredible fight sequence as well, or battle sequence, I should say. Yeah, good point. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Sunfire's was amazing. The visuals, he's supposed to be the most beautiful dragon, and they didn't disappoint in that episode. Like, he was absolutely amazing. Vagar is impressive. Good Lord. Vagar is terrifying,
Yeah.
just the size, and then I don't know how they give it an air if I don't give a flying, but
Yeah.
they sure
Yeah.
do. You can tell that she means business. She's scary. When she kills Rhaenyra's or youngest son when Jace goes to treat with the Stormlands,
Mm-hmm.
and then he gives chase and whatnot. Like, that was terrifying. I can't,
And that's the very end of season 1, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll never forget that either. That was a great moment.
yeah, that was an amazing sequence of him
Mhm.
being chased by Vagar through the stormy
Yes.
clouds, and
Yes.
then Aemon losing control of Vagar and
Mhm.
realizing just how tenuous that relationship is they might listen.
Yep. And as you're describing these dragons, I'm realizing that these dragons are characters. Like, and we don't get
Mm,
that either in Game of Thrones.
yeah.
These dragons actually have personalities
Mm,
and bonds that with their partners and or their writers. And I really like that too. Anytime you can take a mythical fictional creature and kind of give it this, like, I'm not going to say like dog like personality, but it's almost comparable, and I think that
mhm.
that's fascinating and something that this show that's a notch in its belt that it can do over Game of Thrones. And another thing that you said that I want to point out real quick that I liked, you're right, they're going off of a chapter, so in that regard, these writers really should be commended, because if you do keep that in mind, this is excellent, really, quite frankly,
Mm.
because they don't have the density of the 5 books. Speaking of the Game of Thrones books, we have 5, and they're all so big and so dense, with so many characters. Most of the show is almost sometimes like shot for shot what I can picture as I'm reading the books. And I would say that continues through the first 5 seasons pretty accurately. Season 6, because I've rewatched all of these recently, season 6 for me still feels like a really good season. And I think it's because they were dealing with most of a book still. I think he had time by that point to write most of the book. I know for sure he had a very detailed outline they were working from. But 7 and 8 is where you ultimately reach the cliff, and I still personally think that it's a good show compared to a lot of other shows, but no, you can feel the thinness from the first 5 seasons for sure. But what's your take on some of what I just said there?
I mean, I'd agree completely. I might say the first 4 seasons are shot for shot. They're
Mm-hmm.
amazing. It, and then yeah, it's when they run out of material for sure. And then the other problem is they sped. Once they got to a point where I think they realized they weren't getting that material, like it just wasn't coming, and I think they were ready to move on, which I can empathize with completely. But at the same time, it's frustrating that I feel like the attitude was, we started it, this is ours, we're going to finish it. Whereas if they had passed it off to somebody who maybe had the passion that they had lost, which again, I don't blame them. I can only imagine how intense it would be producing the first 5 6 seasons of this, and then the pressure of, oh crap, he's not actually writing this book, and now we gotta take the ball and run with it here.
Yeah.
But I mean, and he wanted there to be 10 seasons, and there
Mm.
was enough material. There absolutely could have been 10 seasons, and then it would be really interesting to, if there was in a perfect world, be able to see what that would have looked like.
Yes.
That was my biggest thing was, it wasn't even so much the choices and the things that happened. Like, they all made sense. They all were foreshadowed, and they all were, for the most part, within that person's character. But Danny's descent into madness in 2 episodes was, like, it was just disappointing to watch. It
Yeah.
was, that should have been 2 seasons, not two
Absolutely.
episodes.
Or very slowly over the whole series, really.
Yeah.
And I completely agree, because if you ultimately know, and I'm sure Martin did, if you ultimately know where you're going with certain characters, you've got to start planting those seeds sooner. And I think because he didn't have those other books fully written, there probably wasn't the time to figure out every little detail, as they're making season 1, season 2, season 3, and so on. They did an amazing job the first 5 seasons, and for me, really, six is really good too. But those all really hold up. But once they ultimately get where they're going, I agree with you that they went too fast. That's one of my biggest issues with season 7 and 8. I believe the first 5 seasons we got like 12, 13 episodes or something like that. And then we get what, 8, 7, I think it was in the final season. Yeah, that was, and I know some of those episodes are 90 minutes or whatever, but it just wasn't the same. All of a sudden, we were getting all these culminations so quickly when we had been building for 5, 6, 7 seasons. And it's like, they should have had more time to breathe. And Dani was such a big character, such an important character, such a great actress who's like a superstar now. Like, why couldn't we have had more time to delve into that? And I actually didn't know that he wanted 10 seasons, and that would have made it so much better.
It deserved 10 seasons, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, good Lord, we spent years and years setting this up. Why are we, you know, it's supposedly, you know, Dan had a deal to do the next Star Wars, and they were off to running to go do that. And then they lost that contract, which I think was partially because of how poorly the season or the series finale was. You know, it was very poorly received, which I think was justified. I think it was clearly just patched together, thrown together, and they just were ready to be on to the next thing, which was really unfortunate. And it was hard to watch, quite frankly.
Yes,
because we got.
Yes, because like you said, there's so many books, so many years, so many seasons. Like, you rewatch the whole. I did rewatch the whole series pretty recently and took notes, and it took me a long time to get through. You know, watching a couple episodes a night, 2, 3 episodes a night, and I couldn't do it obviously every night, and I feel like it took like 2 months to get through the whole thing. But you know, I loved pretty much every second of it. But then when you get to the end, it is such a deflation. One of the biggest reasons why for me, besides Dani, is Tyrion, who is maybe my favorite character in the whole series, or any of the series. And I do think part of that is Peter Dinklage's acting is next level. But he disappears a lot in the later seasons. He really takes a back seat when he's quite frankly kind of the main fish out of water character early in the series, and he's in a lot of peril, and he's got a lot of interesting things going on. But once he murders his father and escapes, his whole storyline kind of becomes in the back seat, and just kind of hanging out, with Dani or whatever. It just doesn't feel like he has much to do. And that was disappointing, because you have an all-time great literary character there, in my opinion. And I don't know, like, what did you first of all, what do you think about that? And like, who's maybe your favorite character in the whole series?
As far as Tyrion goes, he is an amazing character, and I think it's pretty well known that he's one of Martin's favorite characters. I believe he and Arya are Martin's two favorites.
It's funny; those are my two favorites as well.
and you can kind of tell once you find out that those are his favorites. You can kind of tell. He's got a lot of love there. After he kills Tywin, his story gets really dark. Especially in the books, it gets really dark. That's where you start to really, just more than just the trauma of being a dwarf in that setting, even being part of a rich family. I can only imagine how hard that kind of a life would be. But then finding out the story about his wife, which I don't remember how much they touched on in the series. I think they kind of fudged over some of that.
Very little.
Yeah. And then he descends, into drinking, and like, this is meaningless, blah blah blah. In the books though, he meets that character that was cut from the show, Aegon, who is trying to. Well, I wouldn't say he's trying to. He's being groomed to try and go back and to take the Iron Throne, which was really disappointing part that they didn't include that in the series. And had they had the 10 years, I think that they probably would have, and it would have been, it's amazing how much the series divulges from the books, which which I get too, though, because it is, it's an enormous story, which is probably a big part of why we don't have book 6 yet, and not only that, that's another thing that Martin said, that, that was part of his goal. Was he had been writing TV for a long time, and he wanted to write something that was too big, that was, he had been constrained by budgets and by what was possible to film and whatnot. And so this was part of him just, going all out and taking it hard the other way.
Boy, did he. He
Yeah.
did a good job with that, that's for sure.
And it's funny too to read some of his interviews, and people, like point out, oh, an 800-foot wall, like, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, well, yeah, maybe I didn't really realize how big 800 feet was at the time, but it's too late now. It's published." You know, I really enjoy Tyrion's story in the books much more so. Especially where, I mean, I guess at this point, the book's been out for 15 years. I don't have to worry about spoilers.
I don't doubt it. Yeah.
But I mean, there's a couple times where you think maybe he possibly died even in the books. And then getting captured by Mormont, and, being with the slavers, and then making his way to Yunkai, where he's still, for 15 years, we're sitting on the eve of a battle that's coming, and he's in the middle of it all, and we still don't have any resolution there. So his path to Dany in the books has a lot more to it than in the series. So I could definitely see why you would feel like he just kind of fades into the background there, and then when he does meet Dany, it takes all of half an episode before he's her most trusted advisor, which
exactly,
again is, like they're just forcing this, I mean, you could have a half a season of him, trying to be honest with her and give her good counsel, and her, not trusting him for whatever reason. I mean,
right.
Good God, he's a Lannister. Why would she trust him?
Exactly. Trust is earned, especially in a world like this, and in that takes time. And I mean, who would trust Tyrion Lannister when he shows up and starts barking orders? In this world, who would listen to him? Who would trust him? So I agree. And Dany is a very smart character, and been through a lot herself. And you're right. There was so much more depth in the books for Tyrion. My only complaint, and this is more, again, like a personal one, with Tyrion in the books, is he disappears like completely. I think it's book 4. He's like hardly in it at all. I want to say it's book 4. It's the shame that book. That book is
Feast for Crows.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. It is heavily about Cersei and Jaime, which I found interesting. And like the shame part, Cersei, like she's amazing. That's a great part. But I personally was like, I read an entire book and Tyrion wasn't in it. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, I want to say that book came out in like 2004, 2006, something like that. And that was another long wait for the next part, and I mean, this is just, Martin's had this problem now, for 2 decades now, where the story is so gigantically big, and he calls himself a gardener, where he just likes to plant seeds and see where it goes. And so I just have to imagine it, and it's not that I don't think he's working on it. I think that, it's just too massive. I think it's just, it's enormous. I mean, he called, it was called the Myronese Knot, before he put out book 5, and it was all about how to get these different characters to start to all their storylines start to come back together, and it's a massive undertaking, and especially on something where, at this point, I'm sure 20 years ago he thought of it as his life's masterpiece. Now I'm sure he does too, but he's probably come to accept that it's never going to be completely finished, unfortunately. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, if book 6 comes out tomorrow, I'm going to dust off my 1 through 5 and probably read them again, and then get back into it. I mean, I could definitely see, supposedly books 2 and 3 he wrote really quickly, which I could see how, it's all starting to come together. And if he could just get to that point where it all comes back together, I think he could get it done and finish it out.
Right.
But every year it gets harder to hold on to that argument. That's it's losing steam pretty quickly.
Well, and especially when he keeps doing things like House of the Dragon, and we're going to have one more season of that, and I'm sure we're going to have at least one more season of Night of Seven Kingdoms, which was a pretty good show. But would I rather have another season of that or book 6? I think I would much rather have book 6. So so that's kind of my point. Is I think he's spreading himself a little too thin and distracting himself from eating the frog, right? Like he's got to He's got to do the main thing. So you said another thing there, which reminded me of differences from the book and the show. One of the first of all, I loved how he did plant the seeds of the White Walkers, very early in the books. But and ultimately we see where that's going with the show, and that was one of the things that I thought actually worked out pretty well. Arya knifing the Night King and all that sort of thing. Like, I personally liked that, and it worked for me. Danny obviously didn't work for me. Bran definitely didn't work for me, and I'm talking about the very ending. But with the books, one of the other differences that I don't hear other people talking about is, along with the White Walkers. Oh gosh, and now I'm blanking on her name, but the Mother Stark, who died at the Red Wedding.
Cat.
Cat, thank you. She comes back in the epilogue of, I believe I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, as a as a zombie, and it's never brought up again. And I was like, that was an amazing epilogue, and it left me very curious as to what was going on. And I am someone, I should have said this earlier, I watched the shows before I read the books. So I did not, I'm going backwards in that regard. So when I read that part, I was like, oh my God, what? Yeah. Like, we're gonna get her back in the books? That's awesome. But then never brought up again. So yeah.
She's at the end of book 4.
Oh, she is.
Yeah, she is. She can't. She captures. What's her name? Brienne. She captures Brienne of Tarth.
Oh, that was her.
That was her. Yeah.
I don't know that I put that together. That's interesting.
Yeah, so that was her, and she asks her to make a choice, and what will she choose? It was either sword or rope, and she was about to be hung. She already had the rope around her throat, and it closes with her. It says Brienne said one word, which you have to read between the lines, but that word was sword. And her mission is going to be to go and get Jaime Lannister and bring Jaime Lannister to her.
Gotcha. Yes. Okay. I'm glad you pieced that together for me, because I 100% know what you're talking about. That was actually another part of the series I was going to bring up. But there was some vagueness going on there with what was happening and who was who. And for a minute, I thought, oh my God, Brienne might have died. Like, and obviously that's another big difference from the series. But then of course you read later and I'm like, okay, good, she didn't. But I don't think I pieced that together. And that also makes me think of another part in the books, which I absolutely loved. And they could not have done this in the show, and for obvious reasons here in a minute, you'll know why. But in the books, this was one of the most masterful things I feel like I've ever read in a book. And this was the reveal of Theon as Reek. And because we read Reek for so long before he reveals that it's Theon, and Reek is really working. Very interesting character. I'm like, who is this new guy, Reek? And then finally it's pieced together. You can't do that in a show because it's the same actor, right? So how in the world do you do that? But that reveal from Reek to Theon, I thought was just brilliance. I love one of the best parts of the whole series for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then especially when you go through the rereads, and when Bolton actually first comes to Winterfell, you don't realize until the reread, he is the character Reek, who is with Theon in Winterfell when Theon still thinks he's in control.
Right.
Yeah. Masterful. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was a good example of something that you could never do on film. The books will always have an upper hand in that regard when it comes to imagination and things like that. And that was a perfect example of like, oh yeah, you could never do that. And so I understand they didn't even try, because why would you want to? You would just fall short. But that was a great part. And again, one of the reasons why season 6 holds up for me is because of Ramsay. He's a great character. He's a hell of a villain. I kind of feel like Joffrey crawled so Ramsay could walk, or and boy, that actor and that character really carries a lot of weight for me in season 6, and he's a formidable force, and I felt that in the books too. And then love the Battle of the Bastards, and so there was still some really good moments there in season 6. So for me, it starts falling off the rails in 7, but I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, see, six. I have problems with 6 though, because I mean, Littlefinger selling Sansa,
Mm.
man, like that was literally them just forcing the chains being moved. Like I mean, that was. I can't tell you how much I hated that.
Sure,
And then
sure.
all the things that happened to her while she's his prisoner, and then his wife. It was hard to stomach. Like
Yes.
she's a major piece of the puzzle, and giving her away like that, that was ridiculous to me,
Yeah.
personally. And even the Battle of the Bastards was great. The battle was amazing. Jon Snow was heroic. He was all the things. But then again, though, you just had, Sansa just shows up. Oh, by the way, I've got the veil over here. Like, oh, you didn't bother to mention that before I made a crazy suicidal heroic, push to try and keep our castle.
Well, a literal push, because John is getting smushed like in a
Yeah.
compactor in that, which is one of the things visually that really stands out about that battle. But you're right, like Sansa's on the sidelines being like, "You can do it, you can."
Yeah, well, and like Arya saying, "Oh, she's the smartest woman I've ever known." Like, oh my God, come on, come on. She's the little bird. She's Sandor
Yeah.
Cleglane's little bird. Like, I mean, I love the idea of her learning the game, and I think that's where they're going in the books, but they didn't develop that in the show. She just
Yes.
suddenly now she's been traveling with Littlefinger for a couple of seasons, and now
Mhm.
she's super savvy. Like, man,
Yes.
they made things happen so fast to where they just didn't make sense. Like, could she get there? Yes. Did she get there in 6 months because she was traveling with Littlefinger? Like, that's a tough pill to swallow.
And I think that's a great and fair criticism for the show, especially because there's a lot happening there that's off screen. And we don't want to see that, and I understand, like, there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of plates spinning, a lot of mouths to feed, whatever you want to say. And so do we really have the time to learn, to see her learning all of these, tricks of the trade from Littlefinger? Maybe not all of them, but we need to see a certain amount so that it
Yeah.
does feel earned, and we
Yeah.
didn't get enough of that. So I think too much happening off screen, especially with major characters that we're following from episode 1 of season 1, that's a no-no. You cannot do that sort of thing. And the show does do that time and time again, towards the end. And again, they cut episodes. They didn't have the source material. And I wonder, in hindsight, does HBO think, you know what? Maybe we should have just given him the damn 10 seasons and 15 episodes per season, or whatever the hell he wanted. Because look at now. We've got these 3 seasons of House of Dragon. We've got a season of Knight of Seven Kingdoms. Like, it's still a popular thing. Like, and he's still crushing it for the most part. House of Dragons is very popular. I wonder if there's a little bit of regret. Like, should we have just maybe handed over the reins a little bit more and given him what he actually wanted?
My understanding is HBO did want to do that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I wonder who pulled the plug on that then.
D&D.
Oh, that's a bummer. So more reason to hate them then. Okay, good to.
Dude, when the Three Body program or problem first came out on Netflix, as soon as I found out they were behind it, I refused to watch it. I've heard it's great, but I just I loved this series so much, and I'm sorry they just shit all over it just because they were done and they were ready to move on.
Eek. That's hard to swallow. Yes, and I have
Yeah.
not looked into that many details of the actual production. I have watched some of the, highlights and things like that. I should say documentaries. There's a few documentaries on HBO, but of course they're going to put that through rose-colored glasses. They're going to make everything look as good as possible. And I would have sang their praises through, like I said, 5-6 seasons. But yeah, I didn't realize that it was so much on their shoulders for seasons 7 and 8, and. That's good to know. And in hindsight, that does make me a little bit more angry. Well, I wonder now if Martin will one day piece something back together. I mean, I don't know how he could at this point because they really fucked everybody. Bran don't even get me started on that. But
See, what's funny about that is I believe that is George's finish. Like I
Bran,
think that might be his finish.
sure. I
Just
hate
not
how it got there though.
exactly.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and you mentioned Arya killing the Night King. Like I'm gonna have to disagree with you there. I couldn't stand that. I
Oh,
hated that.
okay. Okay, good.
I felt like it was fan service. I felt like
Ah.
it was a quick, easy solution for them.
Mhm.
I mean, really, we couldn't get the showdown between Jon Snow and the Night King. We couldn't get
Okay.
that.
Okay.
I mean, when 4chan has better fan fiction than what they delivered to us, like I
Sure.
don't have you ever read the 4chan?
No. Uh-uh.
Oh my God, it is amazing, dude. It's
Okay.
and it's actually has to do with Jamie, but it's so good that you got to hear this. Final battle of humanity versus the dead. Bran is warged into the past, being protected by Jamie and Brienne. White Walker stabs Brienne with her own sword. She lays on the ground dying. Cut to young Jamie kneeling with Aerys Targaryen, saying, "In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave." Jamie kills the White Walker, and after a brief moment of grief, draws the sword from Brienne, now aflame. Cut to Aerys, the king that he killed.
Yeah, right.
You swear to defend the innocent and the helpless in the name of the Seven. I swear it. Audio of Jamie and Brienne's parting plays as Jamie looks around. They say the best swords have names. Any ideas? Night King appears and stares at Bran, his ultimate target. Oathkeeper. Jamie steps in between them, laughing somberly. Do you know what they call me? As Azor Ahai walks toward the Night King, all that can be heard is a cacophony of voices from past seasons cursing, Kingslayer, Kingslayer, Kingslayer. Like, dude,
That's
that
good.
gives me goosebumps.
Yeah,
Like, that would
I
be
get that
such
did
an
me too.
amazing.
Yes.
Anyways.
No, that was great. I'm glad you shared that. Thank you. And that is good because Jamie is one of these. He's a character who's again so many complex characters in Game of Thrones. There's too many to talk about in one podcast. But Jamie's another one who is so complex because I hated that guy at first, and then you grow to love him, and then he's this kind of like tortured soul. And that's a really good emphasis on that being the tortured soul of his past choices. But I kind of love that. Like that does work absolutely. And for me again, watching the seasons before reading the books and falling in love with Tyrion and Arya specifically is another reason I think why I liked the Night King part so much with Arya. But I can understand like there's plenty of moments like that throughout, especially the later parts of the season, where you can definitely be on either side of the coin with love it or hate it. That's for sure. So I get it.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the people that didn't watch it as it was being made and didn't have to wait every week for a new episode, but the
Yeah.
people that have been able to binge it who haven't read the books that I've talked to, they don't see the problems that I do. Like they say, season 7, season 8 was enjoyable and they liked it, and it's like, oh yeah, you didn't have to wait for years for it. You got to just binge it, and
Yes.
so, but I do think that's interesting that it's not as universally, received the same way, depending on how you are able to consume it.
Yes, because again, like most of my criticisms are going to come from like the technical side, the story structure and the character arcs. Like, do these things work and make sense? I can forgive artistic choices that are different from the ones that I would have made. But as long as it still works, it's hard to criticize that. And I do think that that's for me, that's where like characters like Arya and Ramsay and stuff like that, they fall into that category. Like I personally liked where they went, but I can understand why it doesn't work for some people. And then again, I think my read is different because I didn't start, I read the books after watching the show, all of the show, and I didn't start watching the show until I want to say it was season 3 or 4. And so I did go back, and I was very lucky that I was able to binge, all the way up to that. And then I caught up pretty damn quick because it was the ending of episode 1, the things we do for love. One of the best hooks I've ever seen in a pilot ever. Maybe the best. Pushing a kid out the window while you're having sex with your sister? Like, come on, man. Like, how does it get more effed up and interesting than that? So I was hooked. I was 100% hooked. I was more hooked on the pilot of Game of Thrones than I was Breaking Bad or even The Sopranos, which for me are, those are top 5 shows easily. But yeah, so again, little different the way that I'm coming at it. You're coming at it from the books first, obviously. And so you would have different expectations and hopes.
But they nailed the first 4 seasons, though. I mean, in my opinion, the first 4 seasons is the best television ever produced, bar none. There's nothing that I've ever seen that was as engrossing and captivating. You just couldn't stand it. Had to know what was going to happen next. And it does not fail to deliver. I mean, watching Ned being, losing his head in front of his daughters is just, it's such an amazing scene, and it's such good fodder to feed, to the rest of these motivations and the things that are set to come. Rob, the King in the North. You asked me earlier who my favorite character was. I somewhat guiltily, I probably have to admit Rob. Man, that story of rightful vengeance, and then having everybody come around and rally around you and whatnot. Like, man, I love it. It's a hell of a story.
Yes.
That unfortunately just meets an absolutely brutal ending.
Yes.
Shocking. But the first 4 seasons they're damn near perfect.
Absolutely, no disagreement there, and the large scale of this show, they really swung for the fences, and I agree. First 4 seasons, grand slam home runs, and so intimidating that would be. Can you imagine, like, you're tasked with turning this book series into a show, and then
Right.
you just nail it the first 4 tries, and the pressure that would create, and then again, like you said, not getting the next books ever. So I can understand, for those reasons. I do give D&D a little bit of forgiveness, but because at the end of the day, they're human beings trying to do their best. But I didn't know some of the stuff that you enlightened me on, so that does make me change my opinion on them a little bit, for sure, and the shows as a whole. So another thing you said about Rob, that makes a little bit more sense now. Well, the gut punches that are hitting you extra hard because Rob was your favorite character. That's one of the worst gut punches in the whole series.
And that's when I threw the book across the room. Like, I've never thrown a book in anger, but I was so pissed at what I just read. I mean, I think I stopped. I went back and I reread it to make sure that I was digesting this correctly, and then I threw it across the room. I'll never forget. I was in my apartment in Salem. I was so mad. Oh,
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? If unless there's anything else that we haven't touched on, and again, we could probably talk about this series for a whole week, but unless there's anything else that you think that we should touch on, my closing questions would be for you. What above anything in Game of Thrones do you think would have or do you wish would have happened that didn't? And then I'm going to ask you for House of the Dragon season 4, which is supposed to be the final season of the series. Where do you think it's going, or where would you like it to go?
Oh, what I would like from you. I mean, I would have liked Lady Stoneheart,
Mm,
100%. That was a big part that got pulled out.
mm.
I think that they mishandled. Let me look up his name real quick because I can't think of it. It's
It's so hard to
Theon's
remember all the
uncle.
names. Yes, it's so hard to remember all the names. Oh, pissed off Greyjoy. Yeah, that guy's just
Yeah,
so.
Euron Greyjoy. I
That
mean,
dude's
the
always
show.
mad.
Oh, dude, but they did it so poorly in the show. He just came across as a cartoonish kind of madman,
For sure.
whereas in the show he's this really dark wizard-like figure,
Mm,
and they cut his brother too, who in the books is on his way to Danny, and he has that horn that supposedly is going to give him control of the dragons, and we don't know where that's going. I mean, that's just so much more of a captivating plot line than what we got, Euron and Cersei and whatnot. So yeah, I just would have wished to see it all fleshed out. But I mean, in a perfect world, I wish that all the books were done too. I mean, really, I guess that's what I really want, is that
yeah.
he had busted his butt, gotten and beaten the series. And could you imagine what those book sales would have been like if he had pushed that out right before season 6, if he had released
Oh,
uh, the Winds of Winter? Oh my God. I
yeah.
mean, it probably would have broken records that would stand for a long time if he had been
Yes.
able to meet that mark.
I mean, the
You
dude's
know,
got plenty of money, but like you're
yeah.
right. Like he left some money on the table, some serious money on the table there.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I just would have liked to have seen it all flesh out more.
Yeah,
You have to cut some stuff. And they did a good job with a lot of stuff too. I don't want to be such a downer here. They did a great
for
job.
sure.
The Tower of Joy was super enjoyable.
Hmm.
I mean, the dual wielding swords was kind of ridiculous, but it was still
Yeah,
enjoyable.
yeah.
that was a pretty amazing scene. You know, they did a good job with Jon Snow dying. You know, in the books, it's more brutal. You know, because by the time the show comes around, you pretty much know. But in the books, that's another moment I remember reading. I was on a fishing boat in Alaska, and I was 3 books ahead of my captain, and I remember putting the book down and just walking outside. I remember him coming back, asking me when I came back, was it that bad? And I just said, I'm not going to talk about it. I can't talk about it. So, and I didn't want to give him spoilers, but like, man, you know, after Rob, you know, where do you pin your hopes? Like, who are you rooting for? Like, there's no clear cut, you know, person you're really rooting for at that point. I mean, I suppose for some people that answer would be Danny.
And for me, it was Arya. And I think that's one of the reasons why I liked the Night King part, because I did have this personal, you know, attachment to Arya. Like, she, for whatever reason, she was my favorite Stark. And so that's why, you know, ultimately with the faceless stuff and killing the Night King, I was like, she is turning into the ultimate little badass, and I can understand like issues with that, because, you know, you're dealing with the child and all that kind of thing and whatnot, and doing these unbelievable things, but still, I think, you know, for me personally, the answer to that question would have been Arya, but I agree.
And I think that's a big difference in the media too, though, where, you know, I think book Arya is going to be on a similar badass plot line, but not so in your face, to where like she jumps out of nowhere and kills like the biggest villain in the entire series out of nowhere. You know, I think the Frey pie stuff that we saw, I think that's going to happen in the books, but that's going to be something that's going to be like behind the scenes and nobody's going to really know. You know, she's going to get her moments for sure.
Yes.
But I think that was just, you know, like, oh, we're going to subvert expectations. Nobody will see this coming and people will enjoy it, you know, versus something a little bit cleaner and tied together in a way that makes sense, you know.
Yes,
so.
I agree, and you're right. So many different fan service moments. You know, the Battle of the Brothers or thing or whatever, like towards the end. And you're right. Like in the moment when you're watching it, supremely entertaining, very well shot. You know, like incredibly produced material. So it, you know, as you're absorbing it for the first time, you know, it's hard to complain. But then you look back on it, and afterwards, the emotions have calmed down, and you're like, okay, I don't know if that works, or you know, like you said. So, but overall, I agree. I don't want to end on a sour note, because Game of Thrones is, quite frankly, especially like you said, the first 4 seasons or whatnot. For me, probably the first 6, some of the best television ever made. You know, if not the best.
For sure.
I absolutely love Sopranos and Breaking Bad and a handful of other shows. You know, The Shield. To me, nobody talks about The Shield. That was an all-time great show. But they don't hold up to the first 4 or 5 seasons of Game of Thrones. Not at all.
No. I don't. To me personally, nothing does. House of the Dragon next season. So I have read it. I do have a pretty good idea of what's coming.
Okay.
What I'd like to see, Aemon die. That's for sure. I feel like that's kind of been put off as long enough. Not that that's what happens in the books. I don't remember if it really gets into that or not.
Sure.
You know, Kristen Cole, his death scene was very satisfying. Not gonna lie, didn't particularly enjoy that character all too much. So the arrow to the face was, you know, but that's the only sense of justice you get out of these series is, you know, something like that. Which, you know, while I enjoyed it, it wasn't that satisfying. You know, I mean, It was obvious he was about to go down right there.
Not like Hightowers. Yeah.
That was pretty brutal.
That had some flavor to it, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. You know, I mean, obviously their budget is only getting more and more inflated, and it's hard to imagine there's going to be a whole lot of dragons in season 4, which I think is going to be the last season. Do you know?
That's what I've heard. Yes, that's according to Google as of right now. Anyway, that is what it's saying. So that's not inside information, just Google. But
yeah, no. I think it'll reach its natural conclusion in 4. Yeah,
yes, so. I think so too. And I have not read Fire and Blood, but I think I will. You know, after this series is done, I will probably do the same thing I did with Game of Thrones and go back and read that. And it doesn't sound like it. I've heard from some people on TikTok that it is a difficult and confusing read at times, but still, I'm sure worth it. We haven't really touched on Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but is there anything that you want to add in about that show? For me, real quick, totally different tone, obviously, than anything else that we're dealing with. Had some great parts, had some enjoyable parts, but overall, it feels very different from these two shows.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Night of the Seven Kingdoms, to be honest with you, and I would, if I were you, before Fire and Blood, I would go find all of those short stories of Dunk and Egg. Those
Okay.
are very digestible, entertaining reads.
Okay.
Uh, Personally, I love it. I really do. I love it.
Nice.
Egg is a phenomenal character. That boy that plays him does a great job in making him, super lovable, enjoying to watch on screen. I think the actor who plays Dunk does a great job. He's just kind of an oaf of a guy, very very good natured, very kind hearted. Hard not to like the guy, hard not to cheer for him.
Yeah.
Um, and I love how at the very least, Game of Thrones may have faltered at the end, and as frustrating as that is, at least it set the tone for this series and this universe. So where when Dunk gets pulled into the tent with the Baratheons, like oh, that looks familiar. That looks recognizable. Like, oh, he's a Baratheon. Of course, he's this brash, you know,
Drunkard.
crazy,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
which I found to be really enjoyable.
Hmm.
I'm more excited about season 2 of that than I am the next season of House of the Dragons, to be honest with you. House of the Dragon. Um,
Hmm. Fair enough. Yeah.
I well, because House of the Dragon is on such a grand scale. I think that's
Hmm.
part of the problem of what we're seeing is it's a very big scale, but with thin
Hmm.
characters. Whereas I think Night of the Seven Kingdoms is going to be kind of the opposite thing, to where it's a much smaller scale with much richer characters.
That makes a lot of sense, and that is actually one of the things I did like about it. And I will say again, not knowing anything about it going into the show, because I didn't read any of those short stories or anything, but I definitely will. I agree with you. I plan to. Um, the tone was so different from what I was expecting, because I was expecting another version of Game of Thrones, because House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones have very similar tones, and so this being so different. I mean, I think the opening joke with they're about to play the theme song and then he shits his brains out, like, that set the tone for that show, and then I was like, oh, okay, this is more slapstick, this is more
Mm-hmm.
self-deprecating, and I was fine with that. And then, it just took me a few episodes to really get into it. But I will say by the end, like the whole tournament, the last
Yeah.
2 or 3 episodes when they're really getting into their fights, shot very well. And by that point, I cared about the characters. I cared about Duncan. I really like Duncan, actually. The actor
Yeah.
does him a good job. And you're right, he's just such an earnest, lovable, guy who's trying to do right by this, who's trying to do right by this guy who maybe didn't even really like him that much, but he
Mm-hmm.
looks at him as such a hero. And so there's a lot of funny subtext there. And I do hope, though, that they take their time a little bit more with season two. These episodes felt a little too rushed. Not Many of them were 30-35 minutes, and I found myself wanting more. I wanted to know more
Mm-hmm.
about Duncan's backstory. I want to know more about Egg's backstory, and just see them grow and develop on screen, and not just off screen between episodes or whatever they tell us happened. And so,
Mm-hmm.
not really any criticisms for that show, just a very different digestion from the other two, and it took me a while to get used to it. I think
Yeah.
that's the only criticism I would have, but that's more my issue, I guess.
There's so much material there to go through,
There really
to try
is.
and nitpick. There's so much that they did really well. It's easy to pinpoint the things that they faltered on, that they could have done better, but it's an amazing body of work, and I think the way that we've seen uh, film projects pull from the past in the last 10 years. I mean, it seems like there was a period there where half the movies in theaters were sequels to movies that came
Yes.
out 30, 40 years ago,
Yes.
which that kind of got a little boring quickly.
Oh, for
But
sure.
I wouldn't be surprised if we get another Game of Thrones remake here at some point. I mean, shit, it's been 15 years. I wouldn't be surprised if at 25 they decide to reboot it. I mean, they're going to have a whole new audience of people who don't really know the story at that point. So I'm hopeful that we'll get a more complete version someday. It'll be interesting. It'll be fun to keep the Red Wedding a secret for a third time.
Not sure how you can, but yeah, I know all of that was new for me. So because again, I didn't read the book. So, but now it being so popular in our pop culture, like it would be hard to keep that sort of thing secret.
That was an amazing thing that, by and large, the book readers did a really good job of keeping under wraps. Like there was no moment, like when Harry Potter came out and Snape kills Dumbledore was everywhere. Like the book readers did. I mean, I remember that very specifically, and a lot of people were going to film the reaction of the people around them. And I'm pretty sure you could probably still go back on YouTube and watch those reactions that book readers were filming. And it was amazing. They did a really good job at that. And it's such, I personally, I couldn't find any joy in spoiling that. You know what I mean? Like I want to watch you hurt as bad as I did the first time that you see what happens. I'm not going to make it easy for you. Like it's painful. And you gotta,
that's the brutality of this show rubbing off on you.
100%. And it's in the book. I don't know if you remember, but shortly after that is the fight with the mountain and the they call him the sea snake. What do they call him? I can't remember. The sand snake.
Sand snake. That's it.
Who Pedro did an amazing job portraying.
Yes.
I mean, that was the first time I remember seeing him on screen, and
Same.
I mean, wow, like he just absolutely killed it in that. It was amazing. But in the books, though, it's shortly after the Red Wedding that we get that fight, and at that point you're like, oh, I've earned this, yay, finally something good, and then he gets his fucking skull crushed, and it's just like, oh my god. That was another great moment. Huge props to Pedro for bringing that character to life. He did an amazing job with that. I thought super entertaining. No, I don't. I bet you in the next 10 years we get another remake.
Yeah. I mean, certainly in our lifetime. I mean, and I agree. Like, I hope it'll be as soon as 10 years. We're already getting another Harry Potter series. This Christmas they're making Harry Potter into an actual show, and I'm actually excited about that because I think it works way better as a TV series. And so that's a whole nother podcast right there about Harry Potter. Obviously, another big series, but I agree with you on I would love to see more fleshed out with a lot of these characters, and just see if we can somehow get Martin's vision on screen before the man dies, in some kind of reboot or spin-off or whatever it is HBO wants to call it. That would be a pretty incredible way to end all of this. He's created some incredible work that a lot of people love, and something that would be fun for me, the writer in me would love to almost have an entire episode devoted to one character and break it down for the whole series and see where it works and where it doesn't and whatnot. But I don't know if anybody watching would like anything like that, because I would be happy to talk Game of Thrones again with you sometime if we ever wanted to.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot to go over there.
There is. There's almost an endless amount of stuff to do. So, well, Chris, I appreciate your time. I will let you go. Thank you so much for joining me on this Game of Thrones / House of the Dragon venture. And I hope we'll do another podcast together sometime soon.
Yeah, buddy. Sounds good. That was fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. And thank you, all of you, for joining us. And we'll see what we're talking about next time on the Murga podcast. Boy, I will say, Hightower sure didn't have plot armor, didn't he? That guy got maybe the worst death I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, the North gave him the proper one, huh?
They sure did.